Good afternoon, participants. Hope you are excited for today's AMA session, where we will be discussing frequently asked questions on price optimization engine problem statement under Scalable Solution Hackathon category. This is Simarji from Hack to Skill. I will be your host for today, and I once again welcome you all to the second AMA session of ONDC Present Build for Bharat. The initiative is supported by India and sponsored by industry leaders such as Google Cloud, Protean, Antler, and Paytm, and powered by Hack to Skill. So, as told today, we will be addressing your queries. The Google form which we have rolled back, on that basis, the question will be answered. And if we have time left by the end of the session, we will be taking open mic queries. So, I would like to introduce our esteemed panelist from Paytm, one of the sponsors of Build for Bharat. Mr. Rohit Lohia is working as a Senior Vice President, CEO's Office at Paytm, is an entrepreneur and ex-management consultant with more than 15 years of experience and has a terrific record of successful organizational transformation projects, new business setups, and new process design, back office setup across clients. And so now let me hand over the mic to Rohit. It's a pleasure to have you.
Hello everyone, thanks Simarji. Looking forward to the session. Okay?
Hi, Rohit.
Hello.
Hi. So we will be discussing about this problem statement. I will hand over to you. I have some questions which were submitted by the participants over Google form. So I will just ask the question one by one. Before that, can you just explain this problem statement?
The problem statement is quite obvious the way it's mentioned. The intent is that on the platform, and while this is mentioned as something that we're trying to do in grocery retail, but this could potentially extend beyond grocery as well. Specifically into any area where either there are clearly clearly goods that have a mass appeal and have multiple sellers doing them, or unbranded goods per se, right? So grocery could be a classic example of both of them. The intent is to understand, or the intent is to enable the sellers for a seller to identify what should be the right price for them. See, in an offline world, the discovery of price is not as easy as it is in the online world, right? All you need to do is run a search query and you will get to know multiple options, unlike a store where you visit and you see the price. And therefore, in the online world, having the right price can be a very important aspect of being able to drive sales, right? So that's the broad intent of the problem statement. Any solution that helps sellers figure out the right price for their products to drive sales while not compromising on their profitability would be a good solution for sellers to have.
Shall we jump into the questions which were asked by the participants in Google form?
Sure. Would you relay the questions, Samarjit, for everybody's interest, and then I could start answering them one by one?
Yeah, just, please.
Samarjit, would you be reading out the questions?
Sir, I believe disconnected.
Am I audible?
Yes, Samar.
Yeah, so I will be asking the question one by one. So the first question is, what are the primary data sources that will be used to inform the pricing recommendations?
You could use on-network or off-network data. Let's start with on-network data. The on-network data, at the bare minimum, at the best, like the bare minimum data that you should definitely use is the order data. Beyond the order data, you could also get data around how many people are actually selecting those products, how many people are putting it in their cart, and things of that sort. That all of the data is available as a part of the national health monitoring logs that are submitted by each of the buyer and seller applications. So basically in ONDC, whenever you search for a product, right, the first thing is you're searching for the product, you just get the results. So here everybody's aware of how ONDC works, or should I just spend a minute explaining that as well?
Yeah, that will help you.
Okay, wonderful. So basically, I try to keep it very simple. Feel free to ask me more questions in the open house. Basically, what happens in ONDC is there are two network participants. There's something called a buyer app or the consumer facing app. There's something called a seller app, or you can think of it as a merchant application. So the consumers come on the buyer app and try to search for products, discover products, add that to the cart, place orders for that, make the payments. And on the other side, there are merchants who come to a seller app to list their products. When a merchant lists his or her products onto a seller app, these products can be relayed to all the buyer applications. And similarly, when a customer is coming to search on a buyer application, all these sellers catalog is available. So the order can go to any seller application and the seller associated with that application. The seller application then helps the seller fulfill those orders and so on. Now, in this process, there is a lot of communication that happens between the buyer app and the seller app. The first communication is search, which is where a buyer application will say, oh, I need a grocery catalog, let's say for Delhi. So can I fetch the grocery catalog for Delhi NCR and show that to my customers, right? So that's search. When the search happens, you've got the catalog with you. Now, most buyer apps would end up caching the catalog and they keep incrementally refreshing the quantity, but they'll cache the catalog for a brief time. Now, when you cache the catalog, and let's say as a customer, Rohit goes onto a website and tries to put 2 kgs of potatoes in his basket from a particular seller, then there's a select call that gets triggered. The select call is basically buyer app reconfirming with the seller app. You had listed these products from Samarjeet as the seller. Are these products still available? And can you service these products to Rohit, depending upon Rohit's location? If the seller application says, yes, it's still available and I can service, then the cart building happens, right? So in the cart, just before I go to make the payment, because sometimes the select calls might be slightly, just before I make the payment, there's an init call that happens. Init call is almost like a pre-reservation, right? I'm about to place an order. Can you please reserve it for me so that after payment, it doesn't go into failure state, right? So it's almost like a soft reservation. So I make an init call. Once I make an init call, I get a confirmation again from the seller app that yes, all good. Let's go ahead and place this order. Then I let, as a buyer app, I let Rohit place an order and make the payment. Once the payment is done, then I send a confirmation call to the seller app saying everything is good at my end. Payment has been received. You can fulfill the order. So this is a very basic construct from an ONDC perspective.
Okay.
Now,
Thanks.
each of these points is where you can get very interesting data points. The search call will tell you what are all the products that are available. What is the price at which each of these products is listed? Is there a discounted price against each of these products? A select call tells you which are the products that users are potentially looking to add to cart. An init/confirm call tells you how close are they to actually buying the product. And a confirm call is the actual purchase behavior, right? So if you look at it from a pricing perspective, internally, all of this data is available to you. Now, all of these data points or all of these calls are, we'll come to specific ones later. Let's keep it to the problem statement for this period of time. So all of these calls are submitted by the buyer and the seller apps into what ONDC calls National Health Monitoring or Network Health Monitoring, sorry, NHM. From the NHM system, you can get access to all of these data points, right? So what are the products in the ecosystem? What is the add to cart behavior? What is the actual order behavior? Very similarly, this is on network data, right? Now, similarly, you could go off network. Potentially, you could also say that, oh, let me also figure out how much are potatoes selling for otherwise. Now, the nuance could be, for example, let's go to mangoes. I'll change this a little bit off season, but let's take that example. Let's say mangoes, right? Langda Aam might be selling at a very different price than an Alfonso, might be selling at a very different price than a Dasheri, right? Now, all of these are mangoes, but at the end of the day, each of them will have a different price. So when you look at the catalog from a search perspective, one of the things that becomes important is you being able to identify unique products. Now, products that have standard classification, for example, a shampoo bottle will have a standard EN code saying that this is a shampoo bottle and this is the EN code of the bottle. If you can identify that first, your pricing engine will be much better. For example, if you were able to identify a Langda mango different from the Sherry mango, different from an Alfonso, your model will give you better results. If you're not able to modify them, treat all of them as mangoes, you might actually go haywire because you will see the prices of mangoes are very high and they're still selling because Alfonsos are selling at that price, but maybe the Sherry is not selling at the same price.
Yeah.
Right? So you might give incorrect recommendations from that perspective. So from a data point perspective, you could use both on-network and off-network data.
Thank you so much. Shall we move to the next question?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So could you please provide more insights into the manufacturing?
How do you want to do this? You want to take questions and follow-on questions at the same time, or do we do all the questions and then go to open house? I'm okay either ways.
So actually, today's agenda is to answer all these questions. If we have left time, so we will have an open mic discussion.
Sure, sounds good.
So the next question is, could you provide me insights into the manufacture factor influencing the pricing decision? For example, how does the application consider consumer demand, product shelf life, and inventory levels simultaneously?
Okay. Let's understand what you have access to and what you don't have access to. But before we do that, let me lay a construct in terms of how can you think about pricing as a seller. See, the first thing is step into the seller shoes, right? The moment you step into the seller shoes, you will have multiple questions. The first question is, sahi price kya hai?
Right.
Is it cost plus? Is it marketplace driven? Is it somewhere in between? Right? It could actually be somewhere in between. You have a baseline cost at which you bought products. You have a baseline expectation of margin that you want to make. And I'm not talking about things that are about to go back. Right? In grocery, you will also have a shelf life question and we'll come to that. But you have a certain amount of cost of purchase or cost of manufacture. And then you have a margin that you want to make that sets at least the base price. A minimum margin is your base price, right? And then on the other extreme end, the price could be anything, right? Anybody could be willing to pay anything for that. How do you figure out what people are willing to pay? The price at which trade is happening is a very obvious price at which people are willing to pay. Now, how much do you discount below the trade price, right? And that is where the nuance of a good engine comes in. A good engine doesn't mean that you will discount it 50% and sell everything, right? That doesn't make sense. So a good engine which should be able to discover the right price at which you are getting the kind of volumes that you're able to satisfy. So you have your inventory. You know this is the inventory that you intend to sell on the platform. You might have a time period on which you want to sell that inventory. So there's a certain velocity of sales that you need. The velocity of sale might be different on a weekend versus a weekday. Now, if you have unlimited supply, velocity could be unlimited as well. If you have limited supply, you have a fixed velocity that suffices your demand. At different prices, you will have a different velocity of demand. If your prices are very high, the velocity of demand will be very low, tending to zero. If you keep it at a zero price, your velocity will be very high, tending to infinity. People discover that price, it goes viral, everybody will come and order, right? Somewhere in between is where you have a certain amount of supply that you want to sell on the platform.
Okay.
You need to discover that price. So you could start from the price at which you're selling, let's say, in an offline store. And because an offline store behaves slightly differently from an online store in terms of price discoverability, you could experiment around it. So you could say, okay, let me try with a 5% discount on the price. Let me try with a 10% discount on price. And I'm not even gone to data yet. I'm just talking about your own price elasticity curve. So if you look at it from an economics perspective, there's something called a price elasticity curve. So there's a price curve. The more you increase the price, the less the demand goes. So there's a midpoint where the curves intersect. The supply and demand curves intersect, which is the optimal price, right? From a supply demand perspective.
Yeah.
Now, this is where you can run all your A/B tests. So you could say, I want to do discounting at a delta of 5% and see at what delta am I getting enough demand that suffices for me. You could say, I would want to do it at 10%. So you can define what are the step functions in which you want to try out different prices. You could define whether you want to reduce the price, you want to offer that as a discount, because sometimes that can also have a very different perception impact on people in terms of whether this is a good price for you. Right? Now layer this up with the data that exists. Now, You might run experiments, but even while you're running experiments, you already know a starting point. The marketplace is price पे sell. क्योंकि marketplace पे price पे sell हो रहा है, there is a certain price discovery. Now, how much below this price do I need to be able to sell inventory fast? That again is an A/B test, right? We could continuously run A/B tests, and you could say, okay, why don't you as a seller define your min and max price? And if you want, I can run different tests for you and let you know at which price you were able to sell better. Now, if you think of it, if you take a step back and you forget about all other factors at play, this itself would be sufficient, right? Because इसकी भी क्या जरूरत है, मार्केट प्लेस में दिख रहा है कि किस प्राइस पे बिक रहा है, राइट? तो उससे मैं 1 रुपया भी नीचे करूंगा तो मेरा सामान बिक जाना चाहिए. But there are many factors that come in. Depending upon how strong your brand is, depending upon how well placed your seller app is, depending upon whether the buyer app has identified your discount or not, depending on many other factors, your listing might be at the top or the bottom, right? So if you have, let's say you are a grocery store and you have 10,000 SKUs, a buyer application would have the mindset of thinking that if I send the customer to the store, most likely he will get whatever he needs.
Okay.
So put this grocery store at the top. But if you're a 50-item grocery store, you're a specialist grocery store, and the buyer application has not identified that there is a demand for that specialist product that you sell, they might not list you higher, right? So you might need a more aggressive discounting than otherwise. And that's why all of this becomes an A/B test. So what pricing works for one seller may not work for the other because of many of these factors, right? It's very similar to if you were to go to the market and buy a shirt from a local shop versus you were to go and buy a branded shirt. There could be times when the same manufacturer using the same material has made that, but one has a brand on it, and the brand will sell at a higher price, right? Therefore, one pricing doesn't work for everybody. Each seller will have to identify what is the pricing at which they are able to bubble up to the top or bubble up to have enough sales on their platform.
Okay.
Does that answer the question, Simajin?
Yeah. Thank you for the answer. So moving to the next question, could you elaborate on the concept?
I'll just touch upon one more thing.
Yeah.
There could be an interesting angle that you could think of. Not all inventory is equal, especially when it comes to perishable goods.
Okay.
Right? So while for let's say a Pantene shampoo, if you're putting in a price, this is not going to expire tomorrow, right?
Okay.
And hopefully you have a product that will probably not expire for another 12 months or 24 months. So you don't need to be very aggressive. But let's say you have potatoes. You put them in a cold storage or you store them in your godown. And you know, if I don't sell all of this within 7 days, it might go bad, right? You might start with a slightly lower velocity is okay, but towards the expiry, you might want a higher velocity so that things sell.
Yeah.
Right? So you could also, if you were to make your solution slightly better, you could also experiment with figuring out how you want to price items depending upon their shelf life, right? Because shelf life defines the velocity I need to be able to stock out things that I want to sell on the platform.
Just like first in, first out.
First in, first out is inventory management. It's more like, let's say I bought 20 kilos of potatoes and I'm a small kirana wala. I need to sell those potatoes and I know that if I keep them for more than a month, it will go bad. Now I have 3 kgs left at the end of the month for whatever reason that hasn't sold out. I might go aggressive on it, right? I might offer a very good price on it because if it doesn't sell in the next couple of days, it's going to go back. Cakes, for example. You would go to a cake shop and you will often see in the evening they have a different price.
Yeah.
Right? Because that cake is going to be no good in the morning.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody takes that cake in the evening, it's still fresh, still usable, it's still edible, but next day morning it's waste. So I will sell the cake at a very low price in the evening. I might not sell it at a very low price in the morning.
Yeah. So shall we move to the next?
Yeah, please.
Could you elaborate on the concept of time range validity of the prices? How will the system handle changes in the price over different time periods?
It's again a function of supply and demand, right? At the end of it, what I talked about in the first couple of questions will answer most of the questions below, but I'll try and explain a bit more wherever required. What time frame are you looking at? If you're looking at a time frame of 2 ghante ka window, अगर ग्रोसरी ऑर्डर्स में आप देखते हो पैटर्न की यार इन 4 घंटे में इन 2 घंटे में सबसे ज्यादा सॉरी does everybody understand Hindi or let me switch back to English? If you figure out that these are the 2 hour or 4 hour windows in which I see maximum amount of sales that happens, right? For example, in food, it's very obvious. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, evening snack, these are periods, or nighttime pangs are periods where generally people end up ordering. If you figure out windows where people are ordering, then you could say in this window, I want to be the best.
Yeah.
Right? Rest of the time, I want to take, ensure that I'm skimming the opportunity. There's even a slightly higher price I'm able to demand. That's okay. I don't need great sales, but peak windows, I want higher sales. Right? You could look at it from a month perspective.
Yeah.
And say, like we talked about perishable goods, if they're about to expire, let me go stronger. And that's my internal time frame. Second is the market driven time frame. Again, it's a function of what patterns you're able to identify.
Okay.
And say, okay, in this pattern, I want to be the best. Right?
So moving to the next. So what specific artifacts like data models, algorithm, etc., should be a part of the solution computing prices?
I would not want to answer that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's for each of you to find out. I don't want to be prescriptive on this and limit your thought process
Okay.
in what you would solution and which models you should be using for this.
Okay. So moving to the next then. Can you please provide me the details on how applications should be demonstrated to change the prices when variables are adjusted? Are there any specific scenarios or use case what should we focus on?
See, you'll have to build it as a simulation. You could take the last couple of months of order data and say that if I were to tweak this, this is what I would see as a pattern, or these are the patterns that I'm able to identify as a model, and I'm able to do this. That's one part of the demonstration. The second part of the demonstration is what is the kind of controls you built in, right?
Okay.
For example, a control around min and max price. I'm just giving you examples. Don't say that don't think that these are the only controls that you need to build.
Okay.
This is a way for you to think, right? What are the controls that I can give the seller? Can I give the seller min max price range? Can I give the seller in terms of velocity that he wants to sell? Can I give the seller a control over whether he wants to be the best price in the market or is okay being the second best, third best price in the market? Am I able to give a predictive demand sense to the seller that if you were to bring your price at this point, this is what you might potentially be able to sell, and then let him make a decision? Can I tell the seller that you can automatically do it or you can manually come and tweak it? What kind of reports can I show to the seller in terms of what were the A/B tests done on the price and what were the results of that for the seller to take a call? So anything that you can demonstrate in terms of features and anything that you can demonstrate in terms of predictability or demand would be a good demonstration.
Okay. So shall I move to the next? Thank you for answering this question. So next question is, are there any specific security measure or compliances required that need to be considered while handling sensitive pricing data?
The pricing data here is not going to be very sensitive. See, there's nothing which is personally identified in the pricing data, right? So therefore, the pricing data is not sensitive. You would obviously not want to expose things that are not public knowledge, but here, if you're getting it from the network, it's public knowledge. What the network might do is the network might mask the seller. The network, while giving the data to you, the network might mask the seller and say, I'm not going to tell you which seller or which seller. I'm just going to tell you the product name and how much it sold for, a product ID and how much it is sold for, right?
Okay.
Ensuring that the algorithm does not show competitive information at an individually identifiable level is important, right? It should not be that I know Simarjeet has tried these 5 experiments, and when he tried this experiment, it succeeded, so you also try it.
Okay.
You say, okay, Simarjeet was selling potatoes, and he tried selling potatoes at these different prices, or not, sorry, somebody was selling potatoes on the marketplace. These are all the 10 people, 30 people's data put together in aggregated format, which I'll help you learn from. So you don't make it personally identified. That's an important thing, right?
Okay.
Ensure that competitive intelligence is not put out in a manner that it should be abused or it reflects to somebody else's business and strategy.
Thank you, Rohit, for answering. Shall I move to the next?
Yeah.
What will be the opportunities for testing the solution with real-world data or scenarios during the hackathon? So you can tell about the real-world data.
You can potentially take the older data, but if you want to run A/B test, you could work with one of the seller applications or one of the sellers. If ONDC can help you identify a couple of sellers who are willing to try this out, you could potentially try this out with some of the sellers.
They can also use dummy data sets for it, right?
You can definitely use dummy data sets for it.
Okay. Thank you for answering. So we will move to the next question then. So how should the seller interact with the system to receiving the pricing recommendations and make it informed discussions?
It goes back to the controls that we talked about, right?
Okay.
So on the panel, you should be able to show the seller, this is where your price, this is the pricing that exists in the market, these are the price ranges at which maximum orders for the same product are happening. This is what we recommend. This is potentially the sales you can hit if you work on the recommended price. Giving them controls on min, max, whether I want to be the 75th percentile or the 90th percentile of the order. And please don't put it in percentiles because most sellers won't understand that.
Okay.
But the idea is whether I want to be the best in class, and if you can categorize that and say, I want to be the best pricing, I'm okay to be in the top 10% and stuff like that. Controls that you can give to the seller that they can manipulate would be useful, right? And the reports that you can give the seller saying that these are the 10 experiments you did. This is the trend that we've seen in your experiment. These experiments seem to be successful. These experiments are not as successful, and so on. One of the things that doesn't necessarily go into, I don't know if it goes into compliance or not, but one of the things that you definitely want is not have a dumping kind of pricing. So a seller should ensure that there is a minimum price mentioned, and the minimum price shouldn't be very off, which kind of tantamounts to dumping products in the market.
Okay. Thank you for addressing. So moving to the next, can you provide examples such as implementation or price optimization engine or industries that would lens can be applied in this context?
There are several. You look at something that you would have all faced, right? Do you get the airline ticket from Delhi to Bombay or any sector at the same price all the time? Absolutely not, right? So depending on how much, and now if you look at it, they look at the pricing data of competitors. They would look at how much inventory is available in that sector. They would look at how much inventory is available with me that I want to liquidate because this inventory is going to perish. The moment flight takes off, the inventory is already perished, right? Now I open empty seats can be sold now.
Yeah.
Right? So they take into account all of these factors, and that's why you see different prices. Sometimes they also take into account consumer factors. This guy has come and searched 3 times, so I'll show him a higher price because his intent is high. Right? Or he might be comparing, so I want to show him lower price.
Yeah.
Now, as a seller application, you may not have that granular data at a customer level, right? So you may not be able to do a customer level pricing per se, but you would be able to do pricing based on all the other parameters that we talked about in the first question. Similarly, if you look at advertising industry, right? You go to Google Ads and you bid for ads, right? When you bid for ads, what is that based on? When you try and bid for ads, you could say, oh, I want to bid for ads. I want to have a different price in the morning. I want to have a different price in the evening. It'll show you a prediction that if you keep this price, these are the amount of impressions you're likely to get, or these are the amount of clicks you're likely to get. All of that, right?
Yeah.
So that again is a dynamic pricing ecosystem. It's not a static price.
Okay. Thank you for addressing. So moving to the next. So are there any specific ethical conditions that the participant should keep that in mind when designing the algorithm for price optimization, especially in the diverse market?
I don't think there are ethical considerations beyond the fact that you shouldn't be dumping or you shouldn't be exposing data at a merchant level in terms of how pricing or volumes for that merchant has moved to all sellers. If you're not doing that, pricing is in your hands and you could price things accordingly. Obviously, there are things which are legally not allowed to do. For example, if you know there is demand, there's no other seller, you still can't price something above the MRP.
Okay.
So those min and max ranges that you need to be very careful about. Otherwise, pricing is a seller's choice in terms of how they want to price.
Okay. Thanks for addressing. So moving to the next, how does the engine address challenges posed by various purchasing power access, different demographics, and relations?
You would not have access to consumer demographic data as a seller application, and therefore you would not be doing that. That again goes into slightly ethical boundaries, but yes, you could see where the orders are coming from, right? You could say, oh, these are hotspot customer areas, and because these are hotspot customer areas, I want to be able to sell more here, right? Like we said, if you figure out a time window in which sales are happening and there is a lot more orders coming in, you could use that time window also to your advantage. You similarly figure out there are hotspots of consumer demand. You could use those hotspots of consumer demand to your advantage. There's a very interesting thing that a lot of people in grocery do, right? Which is called everyday low pricing.
Okay.
So what they would do is they would not price everything at a discount,
Okay.
but they would price a few products that are in very high demand at a slightly higher discount to ensure customers see those as lower price products and build a perception of it being the lowest price store,
Okay.
right? So you will see chini at 1 kg will suddenly get a lot of traffic into one of the grocery stores. I don't want to name specific brands here, but you would see people going to a specific store because chini is rupee only.
Yeah.
That may not be true for all of the products. All of the products are not for 1 rupee, right? But you create a sense of everyday low pricing. What is also very interesting, you could use it to your advantage. Uh, in grocery, when you're shopping, and if in ONDC, if it goes from multiple merchants, obviously it'll add to logistics cost from each merchant store, right? In the current way and construct. If you have certain products which are in very high demand and are priced lower than the others, you could get traffic into your store. And once the traffic is in your store, they might discover other products in your store, right? So everything doesn't need to be aggressive pricing.
Okay. So shall I move to the next? So next question is, what role does machine learning play in decision-making process of price optimization? How can participants leverage ML techniques effectively?
See, any modeling that so think of it this way: there are people create rules out of heuristics, and when you have more data points that you can imagine rules around, you try to go to a machine learning and create a model that will be able to handle a lot more variables, right? It helps you optimize it better than otherwise. Depending upon the number of data points you are planning to use or leverage, you could use machine learning if the data points are high and you're feeding in a lot more data points into the ecosystem. You could use machine learning to figure out what is the predictability of those variables. And then whatever variables exist, your machine learning model will throw out that these are the important variables in the model. And then you can optimize your model further to get better pricing out.
Okay. Thank you for addressing the question. So moving to the next, how does the system handle external factors such as economic changes, policy shifts, or unforeseen events that could impact the pricing strategies?
There are two ways of doing it. One way is to very quickly embed into it and have a big predictability around what a particular economic decision will do to your pricing. It's going to be very, very complex to build that, right? An alternate thing is to look at signals, where there is an event which is triggering a signal, right? Uh, let's say you were selling flowers. The flower demand will go up during Valentine's Day. If it's a rose that you're selling, the demand will go up during Valentine's Day. If you're selling flowers in general, the demand might go up during wedding season, right? Now, these are known events. You know Valentine's Day, the prices are going to go up. How much they're going to go up, you may not know, but you know that Valentine's Day prices are going to go up for red roses, right? Now, one of the things that you could do is you know these events are going to occur. And because these events are going to occur, you price based on those events at that point of time. More often than not, sellers will be smart enough to know these events.
Okay.
But if there are off events that happen, which you could not have specifically engineered or the seller would not have known about it, you can build enough alerts in your system. So if you see the market price at which trade is happening significantly shift, and you can define what is significant, right? If you see an off pattern shift in price at which things are getting sold, it should be a trigger to your model to say, seems like the prices are either crashing or they're going up. For example, if you're selling vegetables, we all know how onion prices move, right?
Yeah.
So अगर आपको दिख रहा है, if you are able to observe that suddenly I'm seeing spike happening in onion prices, and even at spike people are selling, but I am not pricing it correctly, it is time for you to adjust. Similarly, if you see prices are dipping because there's oversupply in the market, but I'm still at the top level, therefore my orders have dipped, it's again time for you to adjust, right?
Yeah.
Now, let's say you have a huge inventory of onions, and the price in the market of tanked, right? But you have a certain shelf life, you want to dispose of those onions. Sometimes you might even have to sell things at loss as a trader. Those are controls that you should give back to traders. That this is where they're trending. This is why you're selling or not selling. A very high spike in your sales is also an event you should consider.
Okay.
But at the same point of time, if a very high spike in sales is happening because one of the big buyers decided to promote you because they figured out that your pricing is good or your serviceability is good, and they changed and they started promoting you, you should be able to understand that and not unnecessarily reduce your Japanese prices, because you might lose that promotion if you do that.
Okay.
So keep an eye on patterns. If anything goes off pattern, that's an indicator you need to adjust the pricing.
Okay. Thank you, Rohit, for addressing it. So moving to the next question, are there any guidelines to incorporate customer feedback into pricing models? How does the system balance the data with quantitative insights?
Customer feedback on pricing may not be something that I would personally consider, right? And again, I'm saying I would personally consider is because it help you understand that it is may not, what I'm telling you is not the definitive answer. I'll tell you the reason why I would not consider. If I was launching a product that did not exist in the market, I might want to factor in some amount of customer insight. But if you go to the customer and ask them, will you buy this potato for 2 rupees less? He'll obviously say yes. You ask him, will you buy it for 2 rupees more? He'll say no. But when you actually don't have potatoes selling at 2 rupees, anything less than 2 rupees more, and everybody's changed their prices to 2 rupees more, you will still see this happen, right? People will still go and buy potatoes. So customer feedback may not necessarily give you the pricing that you need to put as a shopkeeper. The supply and demand will give you a better pricing sense in terms of a shopkeeper. But if you're a manufacturer launching a product, that's a different story altogether.
Okay. So I will move to the next question. Could you elaborate on the role of users segmentation in the pricing optimization process? How should the participants approach creating meaningful segments?
See, as I said, you will not have user data as a seller app. And you're not supposed to use user data as a seller app, even if you have the user data.
Okay.
But you can definitely use things that we talked about earlier. For example, there are hotspots of time, there are hotspots of cluster, there are different prices could exist between different cities, right? You don't need to price, you don't need to offer the same. Let me put it slightly different. Pricing and discounting are two different things. Let's say you're selling a product that has an MRP, you can't change the MRP, but you can change the discounting depending upon which location you're selling the products in, right? A location where something has a very high demand and flies off the shelf, you might be able to sell the product without any discounting. The same product might have a very different preference in another part of the geography.
Okay.
You might see chick shampoo selling a lot in parts of the country, but you may not, you will see Head and Shoulders selling better in other parts of the country.
Yeah.
Right. So Head and Shoulders, if you're selling in the same city where chick sells most, you might actually have to go and say, oh, I'm going to change the price and offer discount so that people buy Head and Shoulders. Right. But in other places, I could just use, I'm just using these as fabricated examples, but you get the sense of it.
Yeah.
Right. But you won't have access to very specific customer data. Even if you have access to it, as a seller, you're not supposed to use it. So stay away from using customer level data.
Okay. Thank you for addressing it. So are there any specific challenges or opportunities related to incorporating sustainability or ethical sourcing consideration into pricing optimization process?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
Are there any specific challenges or opportunities related to incorporating sustainability or ethical sourcing considering into the pricing optimization process?
Let me put it slightly differently. See, there are considerations that are manufacturing considerations, and then there are considerations around how you market what you're doing, and then there's a third part, which is pricing.
Okay.
If you are a brand that is sourcing sustainably, it should become a very strong part of your communication that you're doing so.
Okay.
Right? And if you find a niche that buys products because you're sourcing sustainably, then so be it. Then you find that niche and you sell to that niche. If you get a mass appeal on that, then wonderful, right?
Yeah.
But if you, and again, there's a difference between a manufacturer selling on the platform and a trader selling on the platform.
Yeah.
So if it's a manufacturer selling on the platform, the pricing may not just be a demand supply thing. A lot of times the pricing also has many different considerations, right?
Yeah.
For example, Apple will not let you discount products because they don't want you to discount products. Not
Yeah.
because as a dealer you don't have margins and you can't afford discount. Right?
Yes.
Manufacturers do not want you to discount products. Right? You hear about enough luxury bag makers who would rather burn the bags than sell them at a cheaper price.
Yeah.
During COVID early days, people actually, there was enough news of people burning inventory of their products to reduce the supply.
Okay.
So that's a very different consideration set. But if you're thinking from a trader mindset or a retailer mindset / a wholesaler mindset, it's a very different mindset. Then it is about how much I want to sell and how much margin I want to make. If I can sell within the minimum margin I want to make, I'm happy to sell more.
Okay.
Right? So it could be different for different people. A brand that wants to control the price and not have discounts may not want to use a pricing engine. They will either slash their price holistically, and that won't really be based on your ONDC demand and supply engine. That would be a very different decision altogether, cutting across channels for the brand.
Okay. Thanks for addressing it. So moving to the next, can participants explore hybrid models that combine traditional pricing strategies with advanced analytics and machine learning for more robust solutions?
I don't see a difference between the two.
Okay.
Whether you call it traditional or you call it advanced, at the end of the day, it should create an impact.
Okay.
If traditional system creates an impact, then so be it. If an ML model creates an impact, then so be it.
Okay. Thanks for addressing it. So moving to the next, how does the engine handle scenarios when the product demand is influenced by the external events such as crucial phenomena or viral trends? So this one is related to trends, that how does that impact the market?
It's very similar to what we talked about events, right? Just like events can impact surges in demand, similarly trends can impact surges in demand. Any model that is able to catch that this is a sudden spike and therefore I need to adjust to that spike, or this is a spike that is temporary and will die down, I don't necessarily need to adjust to that spike. That's great.
Okay. Thanks for addressing it. So moving to the next, can you please provide guidance on how the participants can address potential challenges related to incredibility of pricing models of stakeholders and end users?
Sorry, could you repeat that question again?
Can you please provide guidance on how participants can address potential challenges related to the incredibility of pricing models for stakeholders and end users?
Incredibility of pricing model. We first need to create a pricing model for it to be credible and credible. Let's create the model first. Hopefully, we create a credible model.
Okay. So moving to the next.
So
What
I'm
will
sorry, I didn't understand that question. So in the open house, whoever raised this question, if I've not understood the question, please ask that again.
so we
So
can like have the participant will be in this session, so we can have an open mic discussion with them.
Sure.
So moving to the next, are there any specific guidelines for incorporating discounts or promotional offers into the pricing strategies, and how can that be balanced with profit goals?
again, you need to set the controls for the seller. The seller should be able to say that this is the price range in which I'm willing to operate. And if you're doing it dynamically, see, there are two ways of doing it. One is the recommendation, one is the dynamically, you automatically change the price. If you're doing automatic price changes or dynamic pricing, you need to have very clearly established guardrails from the seller that if I'm dynamically going to change the price, it's not going to go below a certain price point. It's not going to erode my margins beyond a certain point. I'm comfortable playing in this price range. You set those guardrails for the seller.
Okay. So I would like to open the mic for the participants to ask their questions. So now we are open to the stage for the participants to raise their hands and ask their prototype queries to the experts specifically on price optimization engine problem statement. So I will just call the name one by one if you have. Yeah, Mohammed.
Hi, sir. This is Mohammad Javed, the founder of Mera Kirana. So I have one question over here. So if people start seeing products at different prices, so they might end up buying from different sellers, which might not be logistically efficient.
That's correct. Mohammed, this is a problem statement that many of us as buyer apps are trying to figure out the right answer to. when you're not owning inventory, which is the case here, what you would see in most grocery businesses, the inventory is either owned or tightly controlled by the sellers, right? So if you look at most of your hyper-local grocery sellers, or even if you look at online grocery sellers, a lot of that inventory is either owned or tightly controlled. When the inventory is owned or tightly controlled, and you're shipping it from a particular dark store or a warehouse, it's easy to manage inventory being sold across different sellers. ONDC at the very heart of it is trying to promote local retailers to come on board and be able to sell. So this is a problem statement that somehow gets inherited when we're looking at the issue of pricing or the issue of pricing on ONDC. There are many things that we as buyer apps are thinking of. For example, I let you build a cart, even if it is at different prices. But at the end of it, I let you optimize the cart. But as I said, this will all happen at a buyer application end. The solution that you will design for pricing will be more at a seller application end, right? Most buyer apps, however, might continue with the approach of saying, let me take you to a seller store and let you order from that seller store, right? In which case it becomes a very different proposition. The difference between the two is if I take you into a seller store and I let you build your inventory in that seller store, everyday low pricing for few products works very well. If most buyer apps shift to saying that I will let you build the cart first and optimize the cart later, right? Then everyday low pricing for few products doesn't work. Then every product is competing for price, right? Because think of it this way: let's say I'm $100 cheaper for a particular product, or let's say I'm $30 cheaper for a particular product. But if you build all your cart from Simarjit's store and you take only that product from my store and I add $40 of logistics cost on top of it, doesn't work for you. But if I add only 10 rupees of logistics cost on top of it, it still works for you, right? So I could still end up ordering from two stores. From a customer perspective, it again becomes challenging because you, as a customer, you don't want 10 delivery boys coming in with that order also, right? So how will the buyer apps optimize it is still something to be seen as a problem statement, right? But your point is very valid. This is an issue that comes inherited with store-based shopping.
Got it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. So moving to the next person. Yeah, Shivansh, do you have anything?
Yeah. Hey, Rohit. Hi. So while I was thinking about building the solution, there are two approaches that I was thinking. One would be improving the algorithm so that finally on whatever data we have, we can show the maximum profit of this thing. The second is a dashboard for controls that you told that shopkeeper can have. So while judging the solution or the product, I mean, the reward would be subjective to the data set or whatever we are using compared to the dashboard or the working. So I wanted to ask how it will be judged. Like, will it be live on a server or in A/B testing or what sort of things?
I actually am not sure about that, but from a solution perspective, both are going to be equally important. Having one, not the other, will probably not work out. Let's say you have an excellent model, but it doesn't give enough controls to the seller, it's not going to work out because the model can go haywire, right? And especially with events that might be sport events, sometimes the models can go haywire. Some guy puts a fat thumb error of instead of marking something at 100 rupees, puts it at 10 rupees and submits, and that product is now listed at 10. Suddenly your price algorithm will start realizing that 10 rupees per product bikh raha hai, so I should crash my prices. It doesn't work, right? So you will have to have basic controls around it. Having controls set up, but each of those controls has to be exercised manually, will become too cumbersome for a shopkeeper to do, right? So the solution will have to be a good balance of the two.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Shivansh. So moving to the next person. Yeah, Jasmeet, do you have any question to ask?
Do you have any?
Yes, I do have. My
Jasmeet,
question.
One second.
hold on for a second.
Yeah.
Simaji, to Shivansh's question, do you have any sense of during the final demonstration, how do you want people to demonstrate it, or is that something you'll get back to the audience on?
So we will get back to the audience. If they have any queries related to such, so they can write a mail to me at support@hack2skills. So I will later sit over.
Yeah. So Shivansh, why don't you send that, shoot that mail out to Sumaji for him to respond back in terms of the final demonstration. How is the setup going to be?
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jasmine.
Yes, sir. Sir, my question is, if we go to a tier 2, tier 3 city of India, entering the online retail market, there's going to be an advantage of capital expenditure there, but there are going to be challenges of topography and infrastructure. So how can we evaluate that it's going to be viable?
You're talking about viability of e-commerce in tier 2, tier 3 cities, or you're talking about a pricing algorithm?
Sir, viability, only then we can price, right?
Jasmine,
Both are linked.
not necessarily. The reason why I'm saying not necessarily is very simple. People don't shop only for price. Right? People shop for many different things. People shop for convenience, people shop for price, people shop for availability of assortment. In a tier 2, tier 3 city, you will have enough of problems across these three dimensions. Now, in a tier 2 or tier 3 city, something that is locally produced, you may not be able to compete on price, but you will still be able to compete on convenience. Right? If I were to tell you that I will sell you every 100 rupee item at 16 or 20 rupees higher, will you buy it? You would say no. But today you would use a hyperlocal grocery delivery guy to pay 15, 20 rupees of delivery costs, and sometimes also 20, 30 rupees of low value order premium, and buy something worth 70 bucks for 120 bucks. So tier 2, tier 3, don't look at it, the problem statement from a tier 2, tier 3 perspective. In any market, at any price, you could have a demand based on what you're offering in terms of convenience assortment as well. Right? So at the end of the day, even in a tier 2, tier 3, you could do a pricing model in terms of what works best for that. But will the same price that works for a tier 1 city work for a tier 2, tier 3 city? May not necessarily. Even within a tier 1 city, will the same pricing work in the poshest colony and a slum? May not necessarily work. Right? So it's not a question of tier of the city. Pricing algorithm can be applied in any city.
I hope, Jasmine, that answers.
That answers. I also think that what sir told, that we can get the numbers of footfall of tourists via websites. Sir just told I made a note. So tourists can definitely be a potential buyer if there is a high footfall of tourists in a place, right?
Don't assume just me that tier 2, tier 3 cities don't buy it. Tier 2 and tier 3 cities buy a lot.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaspreet. So moving to the next person. Abhinash, can you please ask a question?
Sure. Hi there. Thank you for this session. So basically, what I wanted to know, based on what I have explored till now, network won't be storing the order data or the inventory stock of all the sellers. So it was mentioned that it will be stored at the seller app end. So as a TSP, how do I get access to this data and build a solution out of it?
So the network
The
has
price optimization.
data. The network has data from the seller app and the buyer apps in terms of the search call, the select call, the init call, and the confirm calls. The confirm call is practically the order data. Select and init are different stages of cart data, and search is all the products that are available in the network. So the network does have.
So okay, sir. Thank you. Sir, apart from that, will the inventory stock data be shared for all the individual sellers? Like how much they have at the
You
real
may
time?
not have inventory stock data which is very reliable, but there is
Okay.
inventory stock data that is available at the network.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abhinash. So moving to the next. Dinesh, yeah, can you please tell your question?
Hi Rohit, this is Dinesh from Unboxing Community.
Dinesh.
We are from Electric Electronic Products app which we are doing it. So two questions. One is on electric and electronic products. When it's coming to the price displaying, can we choose a particular seller or the retailer to have a particular discount model? And the second question is, how will a brand can able to control, for an example, as you said that Apple cannot be discounted or thing, but as we are, can we pass across our margin to discount the product? So these are the two questions.
See, the pricing under e-commerce is always decided by the seller. So your first and the second question goes to the same point. The seller needs to determine the price. If Apple doesn't want its products discounted, Apple communicates that to its channel, that I don't want you to discount the products, right? So if Apple is selling to a distributor and distributor is selling on e-commerce and discounts, Apple will take action against that distributor. As a seller application, that's not your role, right? Your role is to ensure that the seller is able to put their price, which you are putting across the network. The seller is able to put the discount, which you're putting again across to the network. What policies of pricing need to be maintained is the seller's prerogative. So if the seller has a contract with Apple, as a seller app, you are not supposed to be privy to that, right? And therefore, you may not even have data available. The seller should know. The seller should be able to say, on these products, I don't want to do any dynamic pricing. So one important thing, Dinesh, from what you discussed and which I missed mentioning earlier, when you build the pricing engine should not be applicable to all products all the time, right? Again, it's a discretion of the seller, that these are the products on which I want to use the pricing engine. These are the products on which I want to manually select. So you could say, I'm giving you recommendations, but at the end of the day, it's your choice, right? Versus I'm
Understood.
Yeah,
Thanks,
Dinesh.
Rohit.
Thank you, Dinesh. So moving to the last person. So it's Saptadeep. Saptadeep, do you have any question?
No, actually, my question has been addressed already.
Okay. No issues. Thank you. So before ending today's AMA session, this is a gentle reminder that our next AMA session is scheduled for tomorrow. We will be covering a lot of problem statements, so be prepared with your queries and make sure to RSVP. Save the date. I would like to again express a sincere gratitude towards our esteemed panelists. Thank you for attendees for joining the session. See you all at the next AMA session.
Thank you, everyone, and good luck with
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rohit.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rohit. Thank you so
Thank you,
much
Rohit.
for joining.
Thank you, Rohit.
Thank you, Rohit. Bye.